Have you ever examined your thoughts? Have you ever asked yourself if the world and your experiences in it are real? Every day we're bombarded with images in the media, whether it be social media or the good old television. Remember that, for those of you who still watch, it's still here, and it's the precursor of all contemporary media we have today. You see, the unadulterated truth is this: media is the most influential tool of the 21st century. And I'm talking about what we see on the screen. Let's go into it, friends. The word of the day is propaganda. If you're not living in the clouds, you should be familiar with this word. If not, let me introduce it to you. Propaganda, in practice, is the dissemination of misinformation or disinformation to the public. Propaganda could resemble something such as a news report or even an X post that reports a false claim to the public. Propaganda really is in place to sway the mind. And it sways the mind of the public in a particular direction that is of a political nature. Propaganda, to put it simply, is mind control. Now, friends, I've expressed my disdain for people who tell me what to think or what to do because I can think for myself. I've said this before. Your mind must be protected at all costs. It is the source of your identity, creativity, and gateway to discovering reality or truth. Therefore, if you allow the media to take the helm, you've relinquished your free will. Let me explain. This is sinister. Propaganda and propagandists, let me say that, propagandists work like hypnotists. The hypnotist speaks directly to the subconscious or part of the mind that is unaware or not alerted to what is attempting to infiltrate it. Now, in order to gain entry, there must be repetitious suggestions. If a person watches a news report once and processes the gist of that message, he will not necessarily become hypnotized. That's not the way it works. Propaganda must be slowly introduced to the mind and constantly reinforced, because it must rise from the subconscious to the conscious sphere so as to influence a person's overall perception. And I've talked about that as well, friends. Perception is really how we see the world and all that encompasses it. Let's get into something that really is, it's rooted in real life experience, and I like to connect real life experience to anything that I'm talking about. So let's go back to the COVID-19 pandemic, which I believe was the most propagandized and exploited media sensation of the century. We were constantly told to mask up and social distance, and there were massive shutdowns and shut-ins, and the media resorted to fear-mongering so as to tighten the grip of the government upon us. Children were kept from school, and even though they knew that children were really unaffected by the virus, we were told that the children could possibly be carriers and be spreading the virus, and therefore the children ought to be masked, and the adults, particularly teachers, should stay home. We should all shelter in place, because at one point we were all in fear of the children. However, when we checked our TVs and phones, we were also shown death tolls. Remember that? It was on the side of the screen. So many thousands dying, and the numbers just kept increasing every day, every time you watch the news. If you watch the news, many people, the youth particularly, do not get their news from cable or local news. They rely on the internet. So maybe they didn't see all of this. And they probably weren't afraid of it anyway, because the virus was not affecting them. But these images were powerful, because we saw people on ventilators. We saw makeshift morgues. We were told that we were out of resources. We were running out of PPE, and that, we were just in trouble, that this virus had totally overtaken our very existence, and also our ability to rationalize. Not to mention, there were numerous contradictory statements that were in the media regarding the efficacy of the vaccine. Now, the vaccine was something that, to talk about it is contentious. Few public officials dared to challenge the expedient decision to release an insufficiently tested vaccine. And I say it was insufficiently tested because they didn't really have the time to do it. They released it and made the decision, as I say, to release it so hastily because they wanted us to take it. And many people questioned that because they said, wait a minute, we don't even know what that is. You don't even know what that is. We don't even know if it'll work. What are the side effects? What is all this about? Why is this being pushed so vehemently on us? Those were the ones that were alert, but the ones that were hypnotized were totally afraid. So the media pushed this, and most people simply acquiesced. Those people accepted without question that everything we were told was true, even though it was evident that mask mandates, social distancing, and the vaccine did not stop the spread of the virus. The virus was in fact still spreading. People were still dying. People were getting it. Children were getting it. They weren't reporting on that. Children were being hospitalized. Children were getting sick. But that's not really the point. The point is they told us what they wanted us to know, and they told us what they felt would be effective for them to push whatever their agenda was. Let's get into it. What about those who rejected the vaccine and instead opted to take their chances because they believed in natural immunity? Natural immunity is actually factual. We know that. However, yet again, these voices were censored and discredited because what seemed to be common sense did not come from the mouth of a government expert. This is an example of the government telling you that you are stupid and you can't be trusted to make the right decision about your own health. So in some states, the mandates and threats of job loss persisted, all for the purpose of coercing the people to do what the government wants. In many cases, the lockdowns, mask mandates, and motion to terminate employment worked. And ironically, the first to lose their jobs were the very people who were on the front lines of the COVID crisis. My goodness. What kind of government salutes its first responders in public and then snatches their livelihood from them if they exercise personal liberties? Friends, this is the worst kind of evil. To take or not allow for the livelihood. To not allow a person to pursue life is to deny them the only true God-given right that there is, and that is the right to prosperity and life. This is serious. And again, most never perceived this horror. And in fact, people accepted that the pandemic, they said this, was of the unvaccinated. Everything we saw and heard was fed to our mind via the media. We never had direct contact with what we were told because we were shut in. We were locked down. And because we never had direct contact, we took what they told us at face value. We never were able to fact find and discover for ourselves what really was happening and what the truth was. Was there such a thing as herd immunity? Was it possible that if you contracted COVID once, you were naturally protected? What kind of people were at risk for respiratory failure from COVID? What natural remedies could help to mitigate the spread of the disease? None of this was explored. They didn't want it to be. There were voices in the media that were silenced and discredited and downright censored. People kept watching the media and they became more afraid as the pandemic carried on. It came to a point where people stopped hugging one another, touching, or even having social gatherings in some states. It wasn't the entire country. And because of the fear of death. Again, if you follow the media, that was pushed. COVID is a death sentence. That was pushed in your face. It got into your psyche. The message was blatant and it was used to arouse fear and sow division among the masses. Why were we the people? Why were we not allowed to determine for ourselves if we should have accepted the vaccine? Instead, we were fed not the truth, but a massive propaganda campaign that aimed to empower the elite by using scare tactics. This was powerful because whenever fear is induced, it causes irrationality and the perception of the loss of security, which will then create panic. We know this. You see, what we all fear is death. There is nothing more frightening than dying. The media played the death card, and that was their sinister manipulation tactic that allowed them to control many, many minds. And when the mind is in the state, it is a slave, and its master, like the hypnotist, can easily give it commands, and it will execute. This was an evil act that involved menticide, the killing of the mind. But what is most harrowing is the fact that people do not realize that they're being indoctrinated via propaganda. They think that their thoughts and beliefs are entirely their own. They are, in fact, so indoctrinated with falsehoods about the world that they can't determine truth from falsehood. School never taught us anything about the intricacies of the mind. We were never told that the mind is the birthplace and haven of the imagination. We instead have been taught to work for money and possessions, which is ridiculous because we didn't come here with that and we sure won't take it with us. So what is this all about? But man's own sick desire for dominance, superiority, and authority. This is nothing but a God complex. Let us probe, my dear friends, into why we believe all the images that are projected onto our screens are real. Is it because we believe what we can see with our eyes is the truth? I'll ask the same question in another way. What is it that allows for us to see an image and determine that it is false? What makes us reject some things and accept others? Also, is there some way we can discover what is real? Is reality based on something fundamental or absolute? We can use those words interchangeably. What is the determining factor? As a society, our dependency and trust of the media to report the truth is expected. And because of this, we simply don't question it. But I question it. I question how we can trust the information that we are given. How do we know what to believe? And let me take this a bit further. How can we garner trust in those who claim to have our benefit at heart? How can we do that? There ought to be a determining factor for truth, no? And if there is, how do we validate it? Friends, if you like this and you want to hear more, please subscribe to this channel and share it with others. It's time to get people engaged in doing what they haven't been doing, thinking. Until next time.